The letter arrived on a crisp autumn morning, the kind of day where the air smells faintly of wood smoke and the leaves crunch satisfyingly underfoot. It was an innocuous-looking envelope, the kind you might toss aside without a second thought. But something about the embossed logo in the corner caught my eye. Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association. I hadn't lived in Willow Creek for over a decade, not since my parents passed away and I sold the family home. Why would the HOA be writing to me now? I tore open the envelope, my curiosity piqued. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the words typed in a formal font. Dear MS. Emily Carter, we are pleased to inform you that you have been selected as a potential beneficiary of a community improvement project. Your presence is requested at the Willow Creek Estates Community Center on Saturday, November 12th at 10 a.m. Refreshments will be provided. Sincerely, Margaret Winters, President, Willow Creek Estates HOA. I stared at the letter, my mind racing. A community improvement project? What could that possibly have to do with me? I hadn't set foot in Willow Creek since I was a teenager, and I certainly didn't own any property there anymore. But the letter had my name on it, and the curiosity was too much to resist. I decided to go. The drive to Willow Creek was a trip down memory lane. The winding roads, the towering pines, the occasional glimpse of the creek sparkling in the sunlight. It all brought back a flood of memories. I remembered the summers spent swimming in the creek, the winters building snowmen in the front yard, and the countless evenings sitting on the porch with my parents, watching the fireflies dance in the twilight. But as I approached the community center, I felt a pang of unease. The place looked different somehow, more polished. The once rustic wooden sign at the entrance had been replaced with a sleek, modern design, and the gravel parking lot had been paved over. It was as if the soul of the place had been stripped away, replaced by something cold and impersonal. I parked my car and walked inside, the letter clutched in my hand. The community center was bustling with activity, the air filled with the hum of conversation and the clink of glasses. A long table was set up at the front of the room, laden with pastries and coffee. I scanned the crowd, looking for someone who might be Margaret Winters. Emily Carter, a voice called out. I turned to see a woman approaching me, her heels clicking sharply against the polished floor. She was impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, her hair perfectly coiffed, and her smile just a little too bright. Yes, that's me, I said, extending my hand. Margaret Winters, she said, shaking my hand with a firm grip. I'm so glad you could make it. We have something very exciting to discuss with you. Margaret led me to a small conference room at the back of the community center. The walls were lined with maps and blueprints, and a large table in the center was covered with documents. A few other people were already seated around the table, their expressions a mix of curiosity and anticipation. Please, have a seat, Margaret said, gesturing to an empty chair. I sat down, feeling a little out of place. Margaret took her place at the head of the table and began to speak. As you may know, Willow Creek Estates has always been a community that values progress and improvement, she began. We've recently embarked on a project that we believe will benefit everyone in the neighborhood, a new bridge that will connect our community to the nearby park and trail system. I nodded, unsure of where this was going. Margaret continued, her voice taking on a more serious tone. The only problem is that the proposed location for the bridge happens to cross a small section of land that was once part of your family's property. We've done some research, and it seems that when your parents sold the house, they retained ownership of that particular parcel of land. It's been sitting and used for years, and we were hoping you might be willing to sell it to us. I blinked, taken aback. You want to buy my land? Yes, Margaret said, her smile widening. We're prepared to offer you a very generous price. This bridge will be a tremendous asset to the community, and we'd love to have your support. I leaned back in my chair, my mind racing. This was the last thing I had expected when I received the letter. I hadn't even known that my parents had retained ownership of that land. But now that I thought about it, I remembered my father mentioning something about a small piece of property by the creek that he wanted to keep in the family. He had always loved that spot, with its towering trees and the gentle sound of the water flowing by. I'll need some time to think about it, I said finally. This is a lot to take in. Margaret's smile faltered for a moment, but she quickly recovered. Of course, she said. Take all the time you need. But I hope you'll consider the benefits to the community. This bridge will be a legacy for generations to come. After the meeting, I decided to take a walk down to the creek. I wanted to see the land for myself, to reconnect with the memories of my childhood. As I made my way through the woods, the familiar sights and smells brought a sense of peace that I hadn't felt in years. When I reached the creek, I was struck by how little it had changed. The water still sparkled in the sunlight, the trees still stood tall and proud, and the air was filled with the sound of birdsong. I found the spot where my father had always liked to sit, a flat rock that jutted out over the water. I sat down, letting my feet dangle over the edge, and closed my eyes. But as I sat there, something caught my attention. A faint sound, like the hum of machinery, coming from somewhere nearby. I opened my eyes and looked around, but I couldn't see anything out of the ordinary. I stood up and followed the sound, my curiosity getting the better of me. As I walked further downstream, the sound grew louder. And then I saw it. A group of workers in yellow vests, clearing a path through the woods. They were cutting down trees, digging up the earth, and laying the foundation for what looked like a bridge. My heart sank. They had already started construction, without even waiting for my response. I felt a surge of anger, but also a sense of betrayal. How could they do this without my permission? I marched over to the workers, my hands clenched into fists. "What do you think you're doing?" I demanded, my voice shaking with anger. One of the workers looked up, startled. "We're just following orders, ma'am," he said. "The HOA approved this project." "Approved it?" I said, my voice rising. "They don't have the right to approve anything on my land." The worker shrugged, clearly uncomfortable. "You'll have to take that up with Mrs. Winters. We're just doing our job." I turned on my heel and stormed back to the community center, my mind racing. Margaret had lied to me. She had made it sound like the project was still in the planning stages, but they had already started construction. And they had done it without my permission. When I burst into the community center, Margaret was standing at the front of the room, chatting with a group of residents. She looked up as I approached, her smile faltering for a moment before she recovered. "Emily," she said, her voice smooth and calm. "I'm so glad you're back. Have you made a decision about the land?" "You lied to me," I said, my voice trembling with anger. "You told me the project was still in the planning stages, but you've already started construction. How could you do that without my permission?" Margaret's smile faded, and she glanced around the room, clearly uncomfortable. "Emily, I think we should discuss this in private," she said, her voice low. "No," I said, my voice rising. "I want everyone to hear this. You're building on my land without my permission. That's illegal." The room fell silent, all eyes on us. Margaret's face flushed red, but she quickly regained her composure. "Emily, I think there's been a misunderstanding," she said, her voice calm but firm. "The HOA has the right to build on that land. It's part of our easement rights." "Easement rights?" I said, my voice incredulous. "I have the property deed right here, and it says nothing about easement rights. You're trespassing, plain and simple." Margaret's jaw tightened, and she took a step closer to me. "Emily, I understand that you're upset, but this bridge is for the good of the community. It will benefit everyone, including you. Why are you being so difficult?" "Difficult?" I said, my voice rising. "You're the one who's being difficult. You're trying to take my land without my permission, and you're lying to me about it. That's not just difficult, that's illegal." The room was silent, the tension thick in the air. Margaret stared at me, her eyes cold and hard. "Emily, I think you're making a mistake," she said finally. "This bridge is going to be built, with or without your cooperation. You can either be a part of it, or you can stand in the way of progress. The choice is yours." I stared at her, my heart pounding in my chest. I had never felt so angry, so betrayed. But I also knew that I couldn't let her get away with this. I had to stand up for myself, for my land, and for the memory of my parents. "I'll see you in court," I said, my voice steady. And with that, I turned on my heel and walked out of the community center, my mind already racing with plans for how to fight back. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. I hired a lawyer, a sharp and no-nonsense woman named Sophia, who specialized in property rights. Together, we filed a cease and desist order, demanding that the HOA stop construction immediately. But Margaret and the HOA were determined to push forward, and they ignored our demands. Construction continued, day after day, as the bridge slowly took shape. I watched from a distance, my heart breaking as the trees were cut down and the earth was torn up. but I also knew that I couldn't give up. I had to fight for what was right. Sophia and I began gathering evidence, documenting every violation, every trespass, every lie that Margaret and the HOA had told. We filed complaint after complaint with the county, but it seemed like no one was willing to stand up to the HOA. Margaret had too much influence, too much power. But then, something unexpected happened. A local environmental group caught wind of the project and decided to get involved. They sent a team to inspect the site, and what they found was shocking. The construction was taking place in a protected wetland area, and the HOA had failed to obtain the necessary permits. The environmental group filed a lawsuit, and suddenly, the HOA was facing a whole new set of problems. The lawsuit was a turning point. With the environmental group on our side, we finally had the leverage we needed to fight back. The county was forced to take action, and they issued a stop work order, halting construction on the bridge. Margaret was furious. She called an emergency meeting of the HOA board, but this time, the mood was different. The other board members were starting to question her leadership, and some were even calling for her resignation. The pressure was mounting, and Margaret was starting to crack. Meanwhile, Sophia and I continued to build our case. We discovered that Margaret had misled the board about the project, claiming that she had my permission to build on my land. We also found evidence that she had used HOA funds to bribe county officials, ensuring that the project would be approved without any oversight. The evidence was damning, and it was only a matter of time before the truth came out. But Margaret wasn't going down without a fight. She launched a smear campaign against me, spreading rumors and lies to turn the community against me. She even went so far as to vandalize my property, slashing my tires and spray painting hateful messages on my mailbox. But I refused to back down. I knew that I was fighting for something bigger than myself, for the memory of my parents, for the land they had loved, and for the principles of fairness and justice. And I knew that, no matter what, I couldn't let Margaret win. The final showdown came at a public meeting, where the HOA board was set to vote on whether to continue with the bridge project. The room was packed, with residents from all over Willow Creek Estates in attendance. The tension was palpable, and the air was thick with anticipation. Margaret stood at the front of the room, her usual confidence replaced by a nervous energy. She began to speak, trying to rally the community behind her, but her words fell flat. The residents were tired of her lies, tired of her manipulation, and tired of the constant drama. When it was my turn to speak, I walked to the front of the room, my heart pounding in my chest. I looked out at the sea of faces, and I knew that this was my moment. This isn't just about a bridge, I began, my voice steady. This is about respect. Respect for the land, respect for the law, and respect for each other. Margaret Winters and the HOA board have shown a complete lack of respect for all of those things. They've lied, they've cheated, and they've trampled on the rights of the very people they're supposed to serve. I paused, letting my words sink in. But this isn't just about Margaret. This is about all of us. We have a choice to make. We can continue down this path, where the powerful few make decisions for the rest of us, or we can stand up and say enough is enough. We can demand transparency, accountability, and fairness. We can demand better. The room erupted into applause, and I knew that I had struck a chord. The residents of Willow Creek Estates were tired of being manipulated, and they were ready for change. When the vote was finally called, the result was clear. The board voted unanimously to halt the bridge project and to remove Margaret Winters from her position as president. The room erupted into cheers, and I felt a sense of relief wash over me. It was over. In the weeks that followed, the HOA underwent a complete overhaul. New leadership was elected, and new policies were put in place to ensure that something like this could never happen again. The illegal bridge was dismantled, and the land was restored to its natural state. As for me, I decided to sell the land to the county, but on my own terms. I negotiated a deal that would turn the area into a protected nature preserve, ensuring that it would be enjoyed by future generations. The county agreed, and I walked away with a substantial sum of money, enough to start a new chapter in my life. But more importantly, I walked away with my integrity intact. I had stood up for what was right, and I had made a difference. And as I drove away from Willow Creek for the last time, I knew that I had done my parents proud. Months later, I received an invitation to the grand opening of the Willow Creek Nature Preserve. I hesitated at first, unsure if I was ready to return to the place that had caused me so much pain. But in the end, I decided to go. When I arrived, I was greeted by a crowd of familiar faces, neighbors, friends, and even some of the people who had once stood against me. They welcomed me with open arms, and I felt a sense of closure that I hadn't realized I needed. As I walked through the preserve, I was struck by how beautiful it was. The trees had been replanted, the creek was clean and clear, and the air was filled with the sound of birdsong. It was a far cry from the construction site I had last seen, and I felt a sense of pride knowing that I had played a part in making it happen. At the end of the trail, I found a small plaque dedicated to my parents. It read, "In memory of John and Mary Carter, who loved this land and taught us the value of standing up for what is right." I felt a lump in my throat as I read the words, and I knew that my parents would have been proud. They had always believed in doing the right thing, no matter how difficult it might be. And in the end, that was what had guided me through this entire ordeal. As I stood there, surrounded by the beauty of the preserve, I realized that this was more than just a victory. It was a new beginning, a chance to move forward, to let go of the past, and to embrace the future. And as I walked away, I knew that I was ready for whatever came next. Life after the Willow Creek Nature Preserve opening was peaceful, at least for a while. I settled into a new routine, far from the drama of the HOA and the constant battles over property rights. I bought a small beachfront condo, fulfilling a lifelong dream of living by the ocean. The sound of the waves crashing against the shore became my new soundtrack, and I found solace in the simplicity of my new life. But as the months passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was brewing beneath the surface. The victory over Margaret Winters and the HOA had been sweet, but I knew that people like her didn't just disappear. They bided their time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike back. One evening, as I was enjoying a quiet dinner on my balcony, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. It was Eleanor, my former neighbor from Willow Creek. We had stayed in touch after the preserve opened, and she had become one of my closest friends. "Emily, you need to come back," she said, her voice urgent. "Something's happening, and it's not good." I felt a knot form in my stomach. "What's going on, Eleanor?" "It's Margaret," she said. "She's back, and she's stirring up trouble. She's been going door to door, telling people that the preserve was a mistake, that it's hurting property values. And some of the neighbors are starting to listen." I sighed, leaning back in my chair. I thought we were done with her. "What does she want now?" "I don't know," Eleanor said. "But it's bad. She's got a new plan, and it's even worse than the bridge. You need to come back and see for yourself." I hesitated, torn between my desire to stay out of the drama and my sense of responsibility to the community I had fought so hard to protect. In the end, I knew I couldn't just sit back and let Margaret destroy everything we had worked for. "I'll be there tomorrow," I said finally. "But this is the last time, Eleanor. I'm not getting dragged back into another fight." The drive back to Willow Creek felt different this time. The trees were still tall and majestic. The creek still sparkled in the sunlight, but there was an undercurrent of tension in the air. As I pulled into the neighborhood, I noticed signs plastered on lampposts and fences. "Save our community," and "No more preserves." I parked my car and walked to Eleanor's house, where she was waiting for me on the porch. She looked tired, her usual cheerful demeanor replaced by a look of concern. "It's worse than I thought," she said as we sat down in her living room. "Margaret's been holding secret meetings, rallying people against the preserve. She's saying that it's driving down property values and that the county is going to start charging us for maintenance." "That's not true," I said, my frustration mounting. "The preserve is protected by the county. They're responsible for maintenance, not the residents." "I know that," Eleanor said. "But people are scared, Emily. They're listening to her, and she's using that fear to push her agenda." "What agenda?" I asked, though I already had a sinking feeling I knew the answer. "She wants to build a shopping center," Eleanor said, "right where the preserve is. She's saying it will bring jobs and boost the local economy." I felt a surge of anger. That's insane. The preserve is protected land. She can't just build a shopping center there. "She's trying," Eleanor said. "She's got a petition going, and she's collecting signatures to present to the county. If she gets enough support, she might be able to convince them to overturn the preserve." I stood up, pacing the room. "This can't happen, Eleanor. We worked too hard to protect that land. I'm not going to let her destroy it." Eleanor nodded. I knew you'd say that. But you need to be careful, Emily. Margaret's not playing fair this time. She's got a lot of people on her side, and she's not afraid to use dirty tactics. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. I reached out to the environmental group that had helped us before, and they agreed to support us again. We organized a community meeting to counter Margaret's narrative, but the turnout was disappointing. Only a handful of people showed up, and many of them were already on Margaret's side. Margaret, on the other hand, was holding packed meetings, her charisma and charm winning over even the most skeptical residents. She had a way of twisting the truth, making it sound like the preserve was a burden rather than a blessing. "We need to think about the future," she said at one of her meetings, her voice smooth and persuasive. "A shopping center will bring jobs, boost the local economy, and increase property values. The preserve is just a drain on our resources." I stood up, unable to stay silent any longer. "That's not true, Margaret. The preserve is a protected area. It's not a drain on our resources, it's an asset. It brings in tourists, supports local businesses, and provides a space for families to enjoy nature." Margaret turned to me, her smile cold and calculating. "Emily, I understand that you have a personal attachment to the preserve, but we need to think about what's best for the community as a whole. A shopping center will benefit everyone. At what cost?" I shot back. "Destroying the preserve would be a tragedy. It's not just about the land. It's about the legacy we leave for future generations." The room was silent, the tension thick in the air. Margaret stared at me, her eyes narrowing. "Emily, you're always so dramatic. But this isn't about you. It's about the community. And the community has spoken." She held up a stack of papers, the petition with hundreds of signatures. "We have the support we need. The shopping center is going to happen, whether you like it or not." The battle over the preserve became all-consuming. I spent every waking moment fighting Margaret's plans, organizing protests, writing letters to the county, and rallying support from environmental groups. But it felt like an uphill battle. Margaret had the momentum, and she was using every trick in the book to push her agenda. One evening, as I was leaving a community meeting, I found my car vandalized. The tires were slashed, and the words, "Go home," were spray-painted across the windshield. I felt a surge of anger, but also a sense of determination. Margaret was trying to intimidate me, but I wasn't going to back down. The next day, I filed a police report and installed security cameras around my property. I also reached out to the media, hoping to shine a light on Margaret's tactics. A local news station agreed to do a story on the conflict, and I spent hours preparing for the interview. When the reporter arrived, I walked her through the preserve, showing her the beauty of the land and explaining why it was so important to protect it. I also shared the story of the vandalism, hoping to expose the darker side of Margaret's campaign. The story aired that evening, and the response was overwhelming. People from all over the county reached out to offer their support, and donations poured in to help fund our legal battle. Even some of Margaret's supporters began to have second thoughts, questioning the ethics of her tactics. The final showdown came at a county council meeting, where the fate of the preserve would be decided. The room was packed, with supporters on both sides of the issue. Margaret was there, flanked by her most loyal followers, her confidence unshaken. When it was my turn to speak, I walked to the podium, my heart pounding in my chest. I looked out at the sea of faces, and I knew that this was my moment. "This isn't just about a piece of land," I began, my voice steady. "This is about what kind of community we want to be. Do we want to be a place that values progress at any cost? Or do we want to be a place that values nature, history, and the legacy we leave for future generations?" I paused, letting my words sink in. The preserve is more than just a park. It's a symbol of what we can achieve when we come together to protect something precious. It's a reminder that we have a responsibility to the land, to each other, and to the future. The room was silent, the tension thick in the air. I looked directly at Margaret, my voice firm. Margaret Winters may have the support of some, but she doesn't speak for all of us. And she doesn't have the right to destroy something that belongs to everyone. When the vote was finally called, the result was clear. The council voted unanimously to uphold the preserve, rejecting Margaret's proposal for a shopping center. The room erupted into cheers, and I felt a sense of relief wash over me. It was over. In the weeks that followed, the preserve became a symbol of hope and resilience. The community came together to restore the land, planting new trees and cleaning up the creek. The vandalism was repaired, and the security cameras were removed, no longer needed. Margaret, meanwhile, faded into the background. Her influence waned, and she eventually moved away, leaving Willow Creek behind. The new HOA leadership was more transparent and accountable, and the community began to heal. As for me, I returned to my beachfront condo, ready to start a new chapter in my life. But I knew that I would always carry the lessons I had learned from Willow Creek with me. I had stood up for what was right, even when it was hard, and I had made a difference. And as I watched the sun set over the ocean, I knew that I had done my parents proud. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's story on Store of Good Stories. If this story touched your heart or made you think, don't forget to hit like and share the video to spread this positive message to more people. And if this is your first time here, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of the meaningful stories we share every week. Your support is the biggest motivation for Store of Good Stories to keep bringing heartfelt and valuable stories to you. See you in the next video.